In etude number 1, there's a lot of rhythmic challenges and there's a lot of articulation challenges. And this is what we're trying to find out in the first etude. Can you play with good rhythm and good articulation? So all the way through here, you want to pay really careful, close attention to all your articulations. There's lots of accents here, lots of staccatos, and some rooftops too as well. You want to make sure we make a clear difference between all the articulations throughout. There's a lot of dynamic contrast all the way throughout here. Some of it happens suddenly, some with big crescendos or decrescendos. Be sure you're really paying attention to what's on the page. We want to be sure that we really are doing the dynamics in here. They may seem extreme, but do what it says on the page. When we hit the piano at the beginning of the second line, it's a big challenge because we jump up high. And playing high in the bass clarinet can be really challenging. And playing soft highly on the bass clarinet can be extra challenging. Be sure you're not biting. Be sure you're pushing your air all the way through the horn. And be sure you're not moving your tongue too much on the articulations. If not, you can pop an overtone out really easily or get an undertone as well. At the end of the piece, it ends with a fortissimo low F with a rooftop. Be careful not to be too harsh on it or get too excited about it. Be sure it has good tone. Be sure you're not tonguing it too heavily. Overall, throughout the entire piece, double check your rhythms, marking where the beats are, especially in some of the measures, the first and second measures of the third line can be extremely helpful. Also, just really take it slow, only to work on notes and rhythms, but also to be sure that we're getting all the articulations and the dynamics. They can be challenging and show up in weird spots, so we want to be sure we get them put in the music correctly. Etude number 2 is the lyrical etude of the 3 regional etudes. It's a very slow piece, only written at quarter note equals 56. So you want to be sure that you're taking your time with this and not rushing. It's very easy with the triple eighth notes to get momentum going and start to rush a little bit. Keep it nice and slow, keep it relaxed, so we get the most musical quality we possibly can out of it. This etude is all about tone, tone, tone. So we want to be sure every note we're playing is the best possible tone that we possibly can play. So go through it very slowly, take one note at a time, and be sure you just ask yourself, am I playing with the best possible tone? There's lots of dynamic contrast all the way throughout here too as well. Really be sure you do a lot with that. That can make a huge difference in the piece and how it sounds. It's in the key of A flat major, which is a difficult key to play it. There's a lot of pinky work involved in here too as well. So you want to go through really carefully and double check your pinky fingerings. We never want to play 2 pinky fingerings in a row on the same hand. You should always alternate left, right, or right, left at all times. Also, be very helpful to mark all the flats in here to be sure you're good to go on all that as well. Try to connect the dots as much as possible. Think how a good singer would sing this all the way throughout here. The last note, you can hold it for a little bit and fade it out. Just be sure when you fade it out, we have good tone and your pitch does not rise sharp. Etude number 3 is the technical etude of the 3 regional etudes. This moves at a pretty good clip, So whenever you play a fast technical piece or technical etude, it's always a good idea to start on the slow side. One of the things that I would highly recommend is starting this piece with the eighth note for the beat. It makes it a little bit more manageable and a little easier to count the rhythms. As you get faster, you can switch it back over to the dotted quarter note. There's a lot of dynamic contrast throughout, so be paying attention to that. Sometimes when we play fast technical pieces and we're thinking a lot about the notes and the rhythms, we forget about the dynamics, and the dynamics are super important. And here they can add a lot to the excitement of the etude. All the way throughout this etude, you want to keep your fingers very, very relaxed because it moves by so quickly. If our fingers tense up, we can get stuck in some of these runs if we're not careful. At the very end, there's a rallentando in the last measure. And rallentando means to slow down. You can do a pretty significant slowdown here to add some individuality and some musicality throughout the piece. Also be sure you're paying attention to our articulations all the way throughout this, and be sure you take this at a tempo that's comfortable for you. Slow and clean is always going to get you more points than fast and dirty. Etude number 4 presents a lot of challenges. It's got a pretty fast tempo with a lot of fast rhythms. It has a lot of rhythmic changes all the way throughout. A lot of big dynamic changes. And articulations kind of change without warning. So just like with etude number 3, I would highly recommend going very slow on this to start. Just want to be sure you're playing everything correctly right away, both notes and rhythms. Dynamic changes, you want to be sure you're really paying attention to them. Do exactly what it says on the page, even if it seems a little bit extreme. Whenever we play with good dynamics, it adds a lot of excitement to the music, and you can add a lot in this piece by doing that. Articulations change too as well. For example, the last measure of the first line, all the triplet eighth notes are connected. Versus if you look at the last measure of the second line, they're all detached. So just be looking through the piece, be very careful you're playing the articulations that are marked all the way throughout. Finally, the very end, it gets very soft. Be sure you come down quite a bit, and be sure that last note is exactly 2.5 counts and off on 3. It's really easy to give up on that note and to end it too soon. Also be sure that you're playing with a really good tone on the last note, and it's in tune. Check it with the tuner. Be sure the last thing we hear is a nice in-tune C. Etude number 5 is the lyrical etude of the All-State etudes. It's also the last of the etudes you'll play at your audition. In the regional audition, the lyrical etude came in the middle. Here it comes at the end. It's marked larghetto, which means very slow. It's also marked half note equals 60. Good idea on this etude to start is to take a quarter note for the beat, just to double check we've got all the rhythms correct all the way throughout here. There are quite a bit of rhythmic changes, from triplet quarter notes, triplet eighth notes, dotted eighth sixteenths, a lot of change all the way throughout. I want to be sure we're playing those correctly right from the get-go. We have a weird technical thing happen between the second measure and the third measure. In the second measure, we have a low E, and we have to play the left hand because an A flat precedes that, and we can only play that in the right hand. What you'll need to do between measures 2 and 3 is switch your left pinky from the E to the F that comes on the first note of the third measure. This is going to set up the A flat that comes next. It's one you're going to want to practice because it's a little awkward and we don't do it very frequently. There's lots of dynamic contrast throughout. There's crescendos and decrescendos, and also sudden dynamic changes too as well that we want to bring out as much as we possibly can. It's always good to do a little bit too much with the dynamics than too little, especially on a lyrical etude. In the second line, there's a term called leggerio written in the music, and that means light and graceful. So these two measures here, we have some staccato chord notes. We want to be sure we're very light with those, be sure that we're not tonguing too hard, and that's tone over tongue always. We try as hard as you can all the way throughout to produce the best possible tone you can on every note in the piece, whether you're playing loud or you're playing soft. Connect the dots as much as possible. Think how a good singer would sing this. I always like to think of a good opera singer when I work on a lyrical piece. It always helps me quite a bit. Lastly, the last two measures have a rallentando. You want to really slow this down, and when you get to the last note, take that note and try to fade it away. Take as much time as you need to do this. Be sure that you have good tone and that you don't clip the note. It fades away to nothing. Also check with the tuner to be sure that you play in tune. That's a great way to leave a really good last impression on the etude part of your audition.